I still remember the sound of that clock on the wall, ticking like a heartbeat that refused to stop, even when everything else in this house already had. It was Christmas Eve again, the kind that used to smell like cinnamon and pine, and now smelled only of dust and silence. Outside, the wind pushed against the windows as if trying to come in, as if it too didn't want to be alone tonight. Inside, I sat by the old fireplace, watching the last ember fade like the memory of a voice I hadn't heard in years, his voice. There was a time when this house glowed with laughter. Grace's voice filled every corner, and little James ran barefoot through the hallway, his cheeks red from the cold, his eyes shining like the Christmas lights that blinked outside. She used to sing as she baked her pies, and I tease her for using too much sugar. I can almost hear her humming now, carried by the wind, a ghost melody that never learned to say goodbye. But tonight, everything feels like it's waiting. The tree stands in the corner, decorated with the same ornaments Grace made 20 years ago. One of them still has James's tiny handprint on it, faded, but they're a small proof that we were once a family. On the table beside me lies a small box, wrapped in brown paper and tied with an old red ribbon. The paper has yellowed, but I've never opened it. Not once. That box has waited for more Christmases than I care to count. People say time heals everything, but time has only made this house colder. Each year I tell myself I'll move on, that I'll throw that box away, that I'll forget the last thing he ever said to me. But then the snow falls again, the same as it did that night, and I find myself right here waiting for something I no longer believe in. They say every man carries one story he never tells. This one is mine. The story of a gift that was too small, a word spoken too loud, and a silence that lasted too long. If you're listening now, maybe you know how that feels, the weight of what wasn't said, the ache of what should have been forgiven. Before I tell you everything, tell me something. Where are you listening from tonight? Maybe your Christmas looks brighter than mine, maybe your home is full of laughter, or maybe you, too, know the sound of an empty chair. Either way, stay with me. Because this story, this night, is not over yet. It was the last Christmas we ever spent under the same roof. I remember the way the snow had covered the driveway like a clean sheet of paper, as if the world had paused, waiting for us to write something new. But we didn't. We only repeated the same lines we'd rehearsed in silence all year. You stay on your side, I'll stay on mine. That kind of distance, it doesn't start loud. It begins quietly, in forgotten birthdays, unanswered phone calls, meals eaten in silence. James was 23 that year. Too grown to be told anything, too proud to admit he still needed me. He came home 2 days before Christmas, suitcase in hand, with that look on his face, the one that said he wasn't staying long. Grace had been gone 4 winters by then, and we were both still broken in places neither of us had the tools to fix. I tried. I really did. I made his favorite soup. I decorated the tree the way she used to. I even placed that ridiculous plastic angel on top, the one James made in school when he was 7. I knew it was chipped. I knew it leaned to one side. But I also knew it used to make him smile. That year, he didn't even look at it. On Christmas Eve, we exchanged gifts. Just the two of us, sitting on opposite sides of the living room, the fire trying its best to warm what was already too cold. I handed him a small box. Inside was a carved wooden compass I had made by hand, something I'd spent hours on in the workshop out back. I had engraved a message beneath it, so you never lose your way back home. He opened it, stared at it for barely a second, and set it down without a word. Then he handed me mine. A thin, flat package. I remember thinking maybe it was a book. I loved books. But when I unwrapped it, I found a tie. A cheap, synthetic one. Still had the price tag, $5. I didn't say anything. I just stared at it, that strange blue pattern that looked like something picked last minute from the bargain bin. He shrugged, as if daring me to be disappointed. And I was. Not because of the price, but because it told me everything I already feared. He didn't know me anymore. Or maybe he didn't care to. Something broke that night. Something that had been cracking since Grace passed. He said something about moving to Toronto for good, about new beginnings and needing space. I said something back, I don't even remember what, but it was sharp. Too sharp. Words can cut deeper than knives, and mine did. He left the next morning before sunrise. No goodbye. No hug. Just the sound of the door closing and his car disappearing into the snow. I stood by the window holding that tie in my hand like it might still mean something. But it didn't. Not then. That was 10 Christmases ago. I haven't seen him since. People always talk about regrets like they're big, dramatic things, betrayals, crimes, losses. But sometimes, a regret is just a small box left unopened. A word not said. A gift not understood. After he left, I wrapped the compass again. Carefully. Tied it with a new red ribbon and placed it in the bottom drawer of my nightstand. I thought maybe next year he'd come back. Maybe I'd give it to him again, when things were better. But the years went by, and the drawer stayed closed. Every December, I'd take the box out, dust it off, look at it for a while, and then tuck it back away. Like a habit. Like a wound I didn't want to heal. Somewhere along the way, it became more than a gift. It became a symbol of everything I didn't say, everything he didn't hear, and everything we lost in the silence between us. I don't hate him. I never did. But I hated what we became, two men too proud to reach across the distance. And now, the house is quieter than ever. The nights longer. And the tie still hangs in my closet, untouched, like a ghost of a moment I never learned how to bury. I thought about throwing it away, more times than I can count. But something always stopped me. Maybe hope. Maybe punishment. Maybe love. I don't know anymore. What I do know is this, that box in the drawer isn't just a gift. It's a part of me. And maybe, just maybe, it's still waiting, not for him, but for the man I need to become if he ever comes back. Some winters go by without asking for permission. They just arrive, wrap the world in silence, and leave again before you even realize how cold you become. That's what those years were like, long winters without thaw. One blending into the next, quiet, heavy, and slow. I didn't keep count, not really. Only the calendar reminded me that time was moving. That, and the box in the drawer. After James left that morning, the house didn't echo the same way anymore. It used to be that you could clap your hands and hear it bounce back, like the walls were used to company. But after him, after Grace, the house went mute. I filled the silence the only way I knew how, with work. Even though I was already retired, I reopened the shed behind the house, my old workshop. I started carving again. Not for anyone. Just to keep my hands from forgetting. The smell of fresh cut wood became my company, and the shavings on the floor were the only mess I didn't mind. Evelyn Carter, my neighbor, she tried. She'd show up with warm bread, sometimes a slice of pie. She'd talk about church, about her grandkids, about the world moving on. I listened. Smiled. But I never invited her past the porch. Not because I didn't want her to, but because letting someone in meant opening something I wasn't ready to touch. The winters were hardest at night. That was when the memories got louder. Grace in the kitchen, James as a boy running through the hallway, Christmas carols playing low from that old radio we never replaced. I never moved her apron from its hook. Never took down the little painting James made for her in 3rd grade, the one where the sun had a smile and the sky was the wrong shade of blue. I told myself I left them there out of respect. Truth is, I couldn't bear to erase them. I tried writing letters to James. Dozens of them. Some were angry, others just sad. None of them ever made it into an envelope. They sit in a drawer now, under the wrapped gift. My handwriting got shakier over the years, but the words stayed the same, I miss you. Once, I heard he'd moved to Vancouver. Someone mentioned he was working with a law firm. That he had become successful. I remember thinking Grace would have been proud. Then I thought how she'd never get to say it, and neither would I. Marshall, the boy from down the road, started helping me with the firewood when he was about 10. I paid him with cookies and stories. He reminded me of James when he was small, curious, kind, always asking questions. One day, he found a carving I'd made of a small fox and said, "Is this for your son?" I told him no. I lied. I didn't want him to ask more. People think grief is loud, like crying in the rain or screaming at the stars. But it's not. Grief is quiet. It's the untouched seat at the table. The tie you never wear. The Christmas lights you plug in even though no one's there to see them. Every Christmas, I decorated the tree. Alone. Every Christmas, I placed the compass back under the ribbon. I imagined his face if he opened it again, if he read the engraving, if he finally understood. I thought maybe one day I'd drive out there, find him, say the things I couldn't say that night. But fear is a strange thing. It doesn't always roar. Sometimes it just whispers, "Not today." And so the years passed. I watched the seasons shift. The tree outside grew taller. My hair thinner. My hands slower. But the gift never moved. It sat there, wrapped and ready, like hope tied in ribbon. Sometimes I wonder if James ever thought about me. If he ever pulled that tie from the closet and remembered. If he ever missed Christmas Eve in this house, with Grace singing softly in the background and cinnamon on the stove. I like to believe he did. I have to believe it. Because without that, all I'm left with is silence. It was the 23rd of December when the phone rang. That phone, the one on the wall near the back door, hadn't made a sound in weeks. I stared at it like it was something foreign, like it didn't belong in this house anymore. I let it ring twice. 3 times. Part of me didn't want to answer. The other part, the quieter, aching part, hoped it was him. When I finally picked it up, I said nothing at first. Just listened. The line cracked softly, like snow underfoot. And then a voice, not his, but familiar somehow. A woman. Calm, gentle. She said my name, hesitantly, as if unsure I still belonged to it. She introduced herself as Rachel. Said she was James's friend. Not wife, not girlfriend. Just friend. That word hung in the air, light but uncertain. She said she found my number in a drawer. That it had a sticky note attached with the words "one day." For a second, I couldn't breathe. Just stood there gripping the receiver, feeling like I was listening to something sacred. She said James had talked about me, sometimes. Not often, not in detail. Just fragments. Said he had a hard time saying things out loud. That he carried things heavy inside. I didn't know what to say. I didn't ask why she was calling. I didn't ask if he was okay. I just waited. Then she said it carefully, like she was stepping on ice that could break at any second. She said James had been in town for a few days. That he'd come back. Alone. That he hadn't told her why, not exactly. But that he mentioned Christmas. That he mentioned a gift. The air left my lungs. I turned to look at the nightstand, at the drawer where the box sat, still wrapped in that tired red ribbon. She said he was staying at the old inn near the lake. The one where Grace and I used to go for coffee on Sundays. She said he hadn't reached out to me because he didn't know if I'd want him to. He was afraid. And then she asked the question I never thought I'd hear again. Would you like to see him? I didn't answer right away. I looked around the house, the fireplace, the dusty photo frames, the tree that stood quietly in the corner like it had waited too. I thought about all the years I'd spent imagining that moment. The apologies rehearsed in my head. The anger I never resolved. The love I never stopped feeling. I told her I didn't know. I said that honestly. I didn't know what I'd say if I saw him. Didn't know if I'd cry or stay silent. Didn't know if he'd even want what I had to give. She said she understood. That she'd leave the decision with me. But before she hung up, she said one more thing. He kept the compass. I sat down on the edge of the bed, the phone still in my hand long after the call ended. That one sentence echoed in me louder than anything else she'd said. He kept the compass. He kept it. All these years, I thought he'd thrown it away. That it didn't mean anything. But he kept it. That small thing, that quiet piece of me, he carried it through the years like I carried the unopened box. I didn't sleep that night. I just watched the snow fall against the window. The world was white and still. I thought about Grace and what she would say. She was always better at forgiveness than I was. By morning, I had made up my mind. I would go. I didn't know what I'd say, or how I'd act, or if I'd even be able to look him in the eyes. But I had to see him. Not for answers. Not even for closure. Just to see who my son had become. Just to give him the chance to know me again. I pulled out the drawer and took the box in my hands. The ribbon had faded. The paper was soft at the edges. I didn't open it. I just held it tight and packed a small bag. Warm coat. Gloves. The photo Grace took of the three of us on James's 5th Christmas. I didn't tell anyone I was leaving. Just wrote a note and placed it on the kitchen table. If you're reading this, I went to see him. Before I stepped outside, I paused by the door. The air smelled like cold pine and wood smoke. The scent of 100 Decembers. I closed my eyes and whispered something I hadn't said in years. Not a prayer, exactly. Just a hope. Please let him want to come back. The road into town hadn't changed much. The same worn-out signs, the same crooked fence near the miller's barn, the same stretch of trees lining the back route that used to look so much taller when I drove it with Grace beside me. The snow made everything look clean, fresh, like even the world was trying to start over. I kept the box on the passenger seat, buckled in like a fragile passenger. Every few minutes I'd glance at it, as if expecting it to speak, to offer me the words I still hadn't found. I hadn't opened it. I couldn't. Somehow, it felt like it only made sense if I placed it in his hands. Otherwise, it was just paper and ribbon. The closer I got to town, the more my chest tightened. Not from fear, exactly. From weight. 10 years of silence doesn't vanish on the highway. It builds with every mile. I passed the old school where James used to wave at me through the window of his second-grade classroom. I passed the diner where Grace spilled coffee on our first date. The world hadn't forgotten us, not completely. I parked across from the inn, engine still running. I watched the windows glow warmly behind frosted glass. Christmas lights blinked softly along the porch, casting a golden hue that made the cold look gentler than it felt. I didn't get out right away. I just sat there, watching shadows move inside, wondering if one of them was him. I saw myself in the rearview mirror. The lines around my eyes were deeper than I remembered. My beard grayer. I wondered what he'd see when he looked at me. An old man? A stranger? Or the father who once held him up on his shoulders to put the star on top of the tree? I thought of turning back. Of driving home and pretending I had never come. But then I reached across and placed my hand over the box. And just like that, the car engine went silent. I stepped out into the snow, boots crunching softly beneath me. The cold bit through my coat, sharp and honest. I stood there for a long time, staring at the front door of the inn, heart beating like it used to before big moments, before proposing to Grace, before holding James for the first time. But I didn't knock. Not yet. Instead, I walked. Down Main Street, past the church where Grace sang every December, past the bookstore we took James to when he first learned to read. It wasn't just a road back to town. It was a road through everything we were. As I walked, I thought about forgiveness. About how it isn't a door you walk through once. It's a hallway, long and uneven, with doors on either side that take time to open. I wondered if James had walked any of that hallway himself. The snow began to fall again, soft, steady, almost sacred. And as it did, something in me opened too. Not completely. But enough. Enough to realize that maybe, just maybe, love doesn't leave. It just waits. Sometimes for years. Sometimes for a lifetime. I found a bench near the square and sat down, the box still in my hands. I watched families move in and out of shops, children laughing, carols playing faintly from speakers hidden in garland. No one noticed me. That felt right. I wasn't here to be noticed. I was here to remember how to feel again. A little girl ran past, holding her mother's hand. She wore red mittens and had snowflakes stuck to her eyelashes. Her joy reminded me of James when he was small, when his world was simple and full of wonder. I sat there for what felt like hours, until the sky began to fade into dusk and the town lights brightened. If you're still with me, listening to this, maybe you felt it too. That ache in the chest that only comes when something long gone starts to return. Maybe it's a voice you haven't heard in years. Maybe it's a smell that brings you back to a kitchen you haven't seen since childhood. Let me ask you something, where are you right now? Not just physically. Where is your heart? Are you close to someone you once lost? Are you far from someone you still love? Tell me where you're listening from. Not for me, for you. Sometimes, just saying it aloud can bring you back to yourself. Christmas has a way of opening old boxes. Of unwrapping memories we try to bury. But maybe that's the gift too, the chance to feel it all again. Even the pain. Even the silence. Because in those spaces, maybe there's still something waiting for us. The wind picked up gently. I stood again, turned toward the inn, and held the box close to my chest. Tomorrow was Christmas Eve. And for the first time in years, I wasn't afraid of what it might bring. I didn't sleep that night. Not really. I lay in the stiff bed at the inn, listening to the pipes hum and the wind whisper through the cracks in the window. Every hour felt like a memory knocking softly against my chest. I kept the box on the nightstand, still unopened, as if even in sleep it needed to be near me. When the sky turned gray and the town lights flickered out, I got dressed. The streets were quiet. Christmas Eve had arrived. I didn't go to James. Not yet. Something in me said I wasn't ready. Instead, I turned the truck toward the other edge of town, toward the house. The old house. We hadn't lived there in years. After Grace passed, I couldn't stand the silence inside those walls. The smaller place where I live now was easier to breathe in. But that house, that's where everything had happened. Where James had grown up. Where Grace had lived and laughed and lit up the kitchen every December. As I drove, my breath fogged the windshield. The sun was hiding, or maybe just tired. The trees stood tall and still, wrapped in frost, like even they were holding their breath. I turned down Maple Lane, and there it was. The Reed house. The white paint now peeling, the shutters crooked, the porch sagging slightly like it too had grown old without us. The wreath was gone. The mailbox was bent. And not a single light burned inside. The house had no lights. It was the first Christmas Eve I had ever seen it like that. Cold. Hollow. As if all the warmth we once poured into it had drained out the windows and melted in the snow. I parked across the street and just stared. My hands rested on the steering wheel, not moving. I could almost see Grace through the kitchen window, dancing with James in her apron, flour on her cheeks. I could almost hear the record player skipping on our favorite song. I got out of the truck and walked up to the porch. The wood creaked beneath my boots. I ran my fingers over the doorframe, over the spot where we carved a little star the year James was born. It was still there. Faint. But there. The key didn't work anymore. Not that I expected it to. So I sat on the steps, the box in my lap, and let the past settle around me like the falling snow. Neighbors passed by but didn't stop. Maybe they didn't recognize me. Or maybe they did, and the silence between us was mutual. Time has a way of turning familiar faces into shadows. I sat there for hours. Remembering. Regretting. Replaying. I remembered the Christmas James got his first bike, how he screamed with joy and crashed into the bushes. I remembered how Grace burned the cookies one year and we ate them anyway, laughing with our mouths full. And I remembered that last Christmas. The tie. The silence. The way he closed the door behind him and never came back. I don't know how long I sat there before I noticed someone across the street. A tall figure. Still. Watching. For a moment, I hoped it might be him. But the person turned and walked away. Still no lights. Still no voice calling my name. But I wasn't angry. Not anymore. There was a strange peace in sitting there. As if I needed to return to the place where everything began before I could move forward. I placed the box beside me on the step and looked up at the windows. I imagined Grace inside, humming her song. I imagined James upstairs, peeking to see if Santa had arrived. It hurt. God, it hurt. But it also reminded me of something I had almost forgotten. We were a family. We weren't perfect. We didn't always say the right things. But there was love. There was so much love. Even if the house had no lights, the memory of what we built there still glowed. Dim, but steady. And that had to mean something. I stood, knees aching, heart heavier than before, and picked up the box. I wasn't sure where to go next. But for the first time in years, I wasn't lost. The next morning, I woke before the sun. My back ached from the inn's mattress, but it was something else that pulled me up, that old weight in my chest, the one that felt like both fear and hope living in the same breath. I washed my face in cold water, buttoned my coat, and held the box close like it might disappear if I let go. Christmas Eve had never felt like this before, not joyful, not painful, but quiet, like the pause right before someone speaks. The sky was gray and heavy, and the wind whispered like it was waiting too. I didn't go back to the old house. I went straight to the inn. My hands trembled as I knocked on the door. The woman who opened it had gentle eyes. Rachel. She didn't speak, just stepped aside and let me in. The warmth of the fire hit my face like a memory. I looked around and saw him, James, standing near the back window, his hands in his pockets, staring out into the snow like he was afraid to turn around. He hadn't changed as much as I expected. His shoulders were broader, his jaw more defined, but the boy I raised was still there, hidden beneath the years. He turned slowly. Our eyes met. And for a moment, neither of us breathed. There were no grand gestures. No running into arms. Just silence. Thick and alive. I nodded once. He nodded back. I walked over and held out the box. My hands were shaking so badly I thought I might drop it. He looked down at it like it was some kind of relic, something sacred he wasn't sure he deserved to touch. I kept yours, he said quietly. I looked at him. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out the compass. It was worn now, the wood darkened with age, the edges softened. He turned it in his hands like he still didn't fully understand why he had kept it. I didn't get it then, he said, voice rough. But I do now. I wanted to say so many things. That I never meant to push him away. That I was just as lost as he was. That the tie didn't matter, but the silence did. That I missed him every single day. But I couldn't say any of it. So I did the only thing I could. I reached for the ribbon and untied it. Slowly. My fingers were stiff. The paper gave way with a soft crackle, like leaves in the wind. Inside was a photograph. It showed Grace, James, and me. Christmas morning, 25 years ago. We were all wearing pajamas, laughing around the tree. I had framed it with what I carved myself. But it wasn't just the photo. Tucked behind it was a letter. I handed it to him. He didn't open it right away. He looked at me, unsure, and I gave him a small nod. He unfolded it slowly. I watched his eyes move across the page, watched his face change as he read the words I had written the week after he left, the words I had rewritten every year but never sent. The letter said I was proud of him. That I missed him. That I understood why he left. That I was sorry for all the things I couldn't say when it mattered most. When he reached the last line, no matter where you go, you'll always find your way back here, he sat down, his hands shaking, his eyes glassy. He didn't cry. Not fully. But something broke in him. I saw it. And something broke in me too. We sat there in silence. Two men who had forgotten how to be father and son. He placed the photo on the table. Then he did something I wasn't ready for. He reached into his bag and pulled out a small package. I didn't know if I'd give this to you, he said. I bought it on the way here. It's nothing, really. I opened it carefully. Inside was a pair of gloves. Warm, thick ones. My size. Simple. Useful. It wasn't about the gloves. It was about the gesture. For the first time in years, I smiled. Not forced. Not polite. A real smile. James looked up, and for a brief second, he smiled too. We didn't fix everything in that moment. That kind of healing doesn't happen all at once. But something shifted. Something opened. The box was empty now. But in truth, it was fuller than it had ever been. We didn't leave the inn that night. Rachel had gone to visit her family, leaving us the space we didn't know we needed. It was Christmas Eve, but the world outside felt far away. The streets were quiet. The snow was falling soft and steady, coating the windows in a silver veil. Inside, the fireplace crackled with the kind of sound that only lives in memory, low, comforting, alive. We sat on opposite sides of the room at first, still unsure of how to exist in the same space again. James poured 2 cups of coffee. One for him, one for me. He placed mine on the small table near my chair without a word, then sat across from me. It was a small gesture, but it settled something between us. The gloves I had just received were still resting in my lap. I ran my fingers over them like they were fragile, like they might disappear if I looked away. I wanted to say thank you, but the words stuck to my throat. So instead, I just nodded. He understood. The minutes passed slowly, filled with the kind of silence that wasn't awkward, just full. He asked about the workshop, about the carvings. I told him I still spent most of my days there. He smiled faintly and said he still had the little fox I made him when he was a boy. It was scratched now, missing part of the ear, but he kept it on a shelf. That sentence meant more to me than I could show. We didn't talk about the past, not directly. We didn't mention the tie or the door slamming or the years between. But in everything we said, there was an echo of all that had gone unsaid. He asked about Mom. I didn't expect it. I looked at the fire and let the memory warm me like it used to. I told him about the apron still hanging in the kitchen. About the music she used to hum. About how she never let a Christmas pass without burning at least one batch of cookies. He laughed. A small, surprised laugh. I hadn't heard that sound in over a decade. She used to sneak extra candy into my stocking, he said. Even when you said no sweets. I nodded. I knew. I just let her think she was getting away with it. It was the first time we sounded like father and son again. Eventually, he reached into his coat and pulled out the compass. He placed it on the table between us. The engraving caught the firelight just enough for me to see the words again. So you never lose your way back home. I did, he said softly. Lose my way. I didn't respond with words. I didn't need to. I just looked at him, and he looked back, and in that shared look was everything we had both carried: guilt, love, regret, the aching need to be forgiven and to forgive. He took a deep breath and leaned back. I thought about calling so many times. I just didn't know if you'd want me to. I told him I waited every year. Every single one. I said I wrapped that gift each December, hoping I'd get to give it to him in person. He stared at the empty wrapping on the table, at the photograph and the letter, and for the first time, his eyes filled with tears. Not dramatic ones. Not the kind you see in movies. Just the quiet kind, the kind that build slowly and say everything without a sound. We didn't hug. We didn't need to. But when I stood to leave, he walked over and placed a hand on my shoulder. Not a grip. Not a pull. Just a touch, steady, real, enough. I'm not going back yet, he said. I thought I would. But I think I need to stay for a while. I didn't ask what that meant. I didn't need to. That night, I drove back to my house for the first time with a heart that didn't feel quite so hollow. When I opened the door, I turned on every light. I lit the fireplace. I plugged in the tree. And then, I placed the photograph on the mantel. Right beside Grace's apron. The longest night of the year had finally passed. Christmas morning came quietly. The kind of quiet that doesn't ask for attention, it just exists, gentle and still, like fresh snow untouched. I hadn't felt that kind of peace in years. Not the loud kind, but the quiet sort that settles deep in your chest and makes you breathe a little easier. I woke up early, as always. I made coffee, let it brew strong. I lit the fireplace and stood for a while watching the flames curl and dance like they were trying to speak. Then, I did something I hadn't done in a long time. I opened the front door. And he was there. James stood on the porch, shoulders hunched in his coat, holding a small paper bag and 2 cups of coffee. He looked at me like a man who wasn't sure he was welcome, but came anyway. I stepped aside. He walked in. Just like that. We sat at the kitchen table, the same one Grace once covered with flour and pine cones, candles and cinnamon. He pulled out a small tin of her favorite cookies, the ones we used to call Christmas buttons, and placed them in the center. I found the recipe, he said. Took me 5 tries to get them right. They weren't perfect. A little too dark around the edges. But they tasted like memory. We didn't talk much. We didn't need to. The silence between us had changed, no longer empty, but shared. He asked if he could see the workshop. I led him out back, the snow crunching beneath our boots. Inside, everything was just as I'd left it. Tools lined up, carvings half-finished, shavings on the floor like a winter of their own. He ran his hand over the table. Picked up a wooden bird I'd started last spring and never finished. You still remember how to carve? I asked. He nodded. You taught me. We spent the morning there. Not fixing anything. Not finishing the bird. Just being. He even laughed once when he found an old carving he'd done as a teenager, a lopsided bear with one ear bigger than the other. I told him I kept it because it was honest. He didn't answer, but I saw it in his eyes. Gratitude. Before he left that afternoon, he stood at the door and looked back one more time. He didn't say goodbye. He just said, I'll come back tomorrow. And I believed him. I stood there for a long while after he left. Holding the empty coffee cup, watching the snow start again. The house felt different now. Not full, not noisy, but alive. Like the soul of something had returned. Later that night, I sat by the tree. The lights blinked slow and steady. I held the compass in one hand and the gloves in the other. And I thought about time. How it slips away. How it waits for no one. But also how, sometimes, if you're lucky, it gives you one more chance. Grace used to say that Christmas wasn't about perfection, not the dinner, not the gifts, not even the family photo. It was about presence. About showing up. About being brave enough to open your door even when your heart is afraid. I didn't understand it then. But I do now. This Christmas didn't bring back everything we lost. It didn't undo the pain, or erase the years. But it gave us something far more important. It gave us the chance to begin again. And maybe that's what Christmas really means. Not snow, not gifts, not music or meals. But second chances. And the courage to take them.